Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show, and I feel such a great privilege to talk to smart CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs every week. Go check out my back catalogs. So many great episodes and interviews. I interviewed the co-founder of Netflix recently, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, Lending Tree, OpenTable. Those are a few of my favorites. Go check them out. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And today's guest, I've been reading for a long time. Actually, when I was in law school, 2004 to 2007, I actually read his columns long before I knew him. His name is Tucker Max. He's the co-founder of Scribe Media, the premier professional publishing company in America. He's written 4 New York Times bestsellers, 3 hit #1, sold over 4.5 million copies worldwide, credited with being the originator of the literary genre fratire. Am I saying that correctly? Fratire. There we go. And one of only 4 writers to have 3 books on the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list at one time, along with Malcolm Gladwell, Michael Lewis, and Brené Brown. Truly phenomenal. Nominated to the Time Magazine 100 Most Influential list in 2009. And he has his BA from University of Chicago and JD from Duke Law School, lives in Austin, Texas with his wife and 3 kids. And this episode, of course, is brought to you by Rise 25 Media, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. You can email us at support@rise25media.com if you have any questions about that. Tucker, a pleasure to be here with you, and a bit of a roundabout journey for you getting to where you are today, but it's always been a focus on the written word. And, the funny thing is, I just mentioned when I was in law school, somehow I came across these crazy columns that you wrote when you were in law school. Yep. And what motivated you to start writing those in the first place? Obviously, I'm sure you didn't know where it would lead. Misery.
No, I'm dead serious.
The misery of law school.
I could not be more serious, right? Law school is, actually, I had a lot of fun in law school. Being a lawyer is miserable. I had a lot of fun because I learned very early on that you don't have to go to class at all. That when I was there, you didn't have to go to class, and your entire grade is one exam at the end of the semester. So I was like, well, why? I could just go be in Cancun, or I can drink 5 nights a week in Chapel Hill, or I can do whatever. And I did. And I had some great friends at Duke, and we had an amazing time. It was actually I'm the only person for whom law school was way more fun than undergrad. It was bad. And, but no, it was great. But where I was miserable was during the summers, and then after, my friends and I went to work at law firms. And I hated it, and they hated it. And so I would just write about funny emails to my friends. Yeah. And that's really where it started, man. I was trying to make my friends laugh in the midst of all our misery.
Right. And you had some crazy experiences during that time. At what point did you realize that this writing could take me further? Because I guess the emails started getting forwarded, and then they started getting attention.
That was really it. When you start getting your writing shared with you by people that you didn't share it with, then it's there's something here. Because I would send my stuff to my 9 friends in law school, and then they would send it to their friend. And it's not like I told them to. This wasn't hey, share my stuff. This is 2000, 2001, 2002. This is before MySpace even existed, right? There was no sharing economy. There was no virality. There was no likes. And so social media didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so email was still relatively new. And so this is back, if you're old like me and you remember email forwards. And so this is back when email forwards were a thing. And so I would get my emails forwarded back to me by friends in other social networks.
You're like, you got to read this.
Right. No, seriously. I cannot tell you how many times some friend would email me and be like, dude, this is so funny. You should read this. And I'm like, scroll down, remember all the headers, right? Scroll down to the bottom, look at who the original author is. They're like, oh, no wonder I sent it to you. Like, or it reminded me of you. You actually wrote it. Happened all the time. That's like in entrepreneurship, when like someone's paying you for a service you're not even trying to sell, then you've got a business.
Right.
Same thing with writing. When people are sending it to you,
I'm always fascinated by people that have different elements to their personality. There's some people that are clearly right-brained, and there's some people that are clearly left-brained. On the one hand, you're proceeding down a very traditional conservative path of becoming a lawyer. On the other hand, you're catching fire, lightning in a bottle in a sense, for writing that was exhibiting a wild side to you. Did you feel, were you always like that? And did you struggle between which path do I go down?
Yeah. So to be just really frank about it, man, I was a weird, unusual kid in that I was I was always kind of like that. Like I was really smart. I was in all the AP advanced classes, and I was also a good athlete. Right. And so like those, but I wasn't like one of those weird uber successful nerds who were great at everything, or people who were great at, like, I wasn't that at all either. I was like the guy in the smart people classes who also played sports, but I didn't like either groups. Like I didn't like the nerds because they were too, I'm like, what is wrong with you guys? Go live life. And then the jocks were meathead assholes. So it was, I can't get along with any of them.
Yeah.
And then like, so you get, there's a million of ways like my life played out like that. But the reason I think I had that dichotomy is as you go through school, I know you know this because we went to the same, we went through the same process, right? And like you have to get, so to speak, put in a box, right? You get on a track, and it's like, okay, on this track, there's the doctor track, the lawyer track, the finance Wall Street track, the business MBA track, and like there's a certain way you have to act, and a certain thing you have to do, and a certain person you have to be, and that never worked for me. Right. Even though most people who tell that story don't do well in school. I did really well in school. And it's not because I'm smarter than all these, all these brilliant entrepreneurs who failed out of school. I'm no smarter than they are. I just realized school was a game and I hacked it and they didn't. That's it. That's the only difference. Mm-hmm. And so like, I'm like the weird renegade sort of rogue entrepreneur who learned how to hack school. And so I did really good at school. But I was never really one of those people. I was too young and immature and stupid to realize I didn't belong in the normal, tracks. Because as a young kid, you think, well, you get status and money by being a lawyer or a doctor or finance. So like, of course I'm going to go do that. Why would I be a writer or entrepreneur? What does it even entrepreneur mean? At least back then. Now it's cool. It wasn't cool when we were in school, right?
Yeah.
And so like, no, for me, it was more like I was going after the easy money and the easy status, like consciously. But subconsciously, I knew, man, I was never going to be able to be one of those people. And so like that inevitable collision was coming. It just happened to spring up the way it did with writing coming out as a result.
And you said, well, it sounds like perhaps where the rubber met the road was, you said 2.5 weeks into your legal career, you got fired, right? So
yeah, I did. And I deserved to be fired. It was not like, it was 100% the right move.
Before that happened, did you ever fear that the wild side was going to get in the way of this trajectory down the conservative path? No, you didn't. So maybe that was the subconscious side of you.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like this. All right. Do you know Jeff Woods? I feel like you might know him.
GEOF, that Jeff.
Right. So he runs like the One Thing program for okay. So I just did his, the One Thing has a great sort of values thing you go through. And like you find this process they run you through and you get he just ran me through it and you get your 3 primary values. And I knew, it was so funny. I knew going in what my first one was. It took me an hour to pick them all because it's like impossible. But once I got there, I was like, oh, I knew that was going to be number one. My number one value is truth, right? And it has been my whole life. And so like, This is a way to answer your question. So like, if you truly, and then my number 2 value is freedom. And it's been that way my whole life, right? Now, my 3rd value has changed a lot in my life. I forget what it was before when I was younger, or I don't even know, it was something else. But now it's relationships. But if you actually value truth and you pay the price for that value, and you actually value freedom and you pay the price, you can't be a lawyer. You can't be a doctor. You can't be, corporate executive in any conventional sense, because if you are, you're a part of a bureaucracy that demands obedience from you. You must act a certain way. You must do a certain thing. And I'm not even saying that judgmentally, like it's bad or good. It's just you have to be a certain person. And I'm just not that dude. like nothing against being lawyer, doctor, whatever, right? But I am just not the type of person who's going to do it that way.
Right. Now,
so it's just inevitable.
So when you hit that reckoning, you get fired 2.5 weeks into it after 3 years and taking the bar exam. Where do you turn to next? What was the next decision?
So I was 25 and stupid. So I didn't realize all this, right? And so I was upset and a little bit distressed, right? I wasn't like broken or that, but it was stressful because I'm like, this is the thing thought I was going to do. I trained for it, even though not what I should be doing. So after that, I went to work for my father. He has a bunch of restaurants in South Florida and still does. And my father ended up firing me from the family business in 6 months.
So 2 firings in 6 months. Dude, one from family. Okay.
Family. and this is like, that's why I'm not trying to paint like a super rosy hero picture of me, because God knows I was doing plenty of things to deserve to get fired. Right. And it's not like I was making this conscious moral stand. It was much more of just like, I needed to go do my own thing. And
what were you doing? Were you waiting tables, managing restaurants? What were you doing?
Yeah, I was managing.
Yeah.
And I
waited tables in college. I think everyone should at some point.
100%.
Yeah. You learn a lot.
No, I was very good at it. I'll tell you where the problem was. So my dad, he had a pretty big, like, I don't know, 5-6 restaurants. And so he had kind of a management layer, and they were all stupid and lazy and thieves. And I figured it out quickly.
Yeah.
And I was 25.
Yeah.
And my name was on the door. The restaurants were called Max's Grill.
Okay.
And it's my dad. So I figured that like I was right and I'm family. So clearly my dad's going to back me. And so I basically was like, told them, you're lazy and stupid and you're stealing and I'm going to get you fired.
That must have gone over
and
well.
we're going to grow this company. Well, I didn't care if it went over well with them, because I was right and my name's on the door. So clearly I'm going to win, right? Oh no, that's not how office politics works, my son. No, my dad is among his many flaws, he's very, very narcissistic. And the reason that he had, it wasn't an accident, he had stupid, lazy, thieving people working for him, because they were very good at playing to his ego, and I was not.
Yeah.
And they won the internal political battle.
Yeah.
And
so
Daddy fired me.
At what point did you pursue the writing path? Then did you say, all right, I'm going to make a go of writing?
No. So the whole time I was writing. The stuff you read I was writing when I was working for my dad, right? Miserable in Florida, when I was at the law firm, miserable there, or whatever. And so it wasn't until after I got fired from by my dad from the family business that one of my friends, he's actually an editor at Real Clear Politics now. He's like a senior editor, one of the big guys there. He emailed me or called me, and he's like, "Look, Tucker, I know you're not so good at law, you're not so good at business, but the thing you're really good at, man, is writing." And I'm like, "Writing? What are you talking about?" He's like, "Dude, these emails you're sending are the funniest things I have ever read in my life." And I'm like, "Well, what? Yeah, well, I'm going to be a writer like I'm some sort of bitch." And he's like, "Well, maybe you haven't seen what's going on. Bitch or not, it's the thing you're good at. And you've been kicked out of like everything else."
Right.
And I was like, "Oh shit, maybe he's right." And so long story short, I tried to get published, because at that point especially, you're like, oh, well, if writers get published, that's what you have to do. You have to get picked. I didn't even think about it as a thing. I just and I got rejected by every single publishing house and agent And I mean, no exaggeration, 100% rejection.
And did you send your columns that you'd written?
Oh, dude, to like 1,000 publishers. And this is back when there were a lot of publishers and a lot of book agents. And now there's like 80% less. But there were a lot then. I probably sent out, like, I'm not joking. Like, I know it was at least 500. I think it was closer to 1,000 query
that's
letters.
Crazy.
And like, 95% didn't send no response. And then everyone else rejection. A few people actually wrote personalized rejection letters. Like, you should never write an email again. Like, you should never, you should give this up and go into bartending or whatever. And so like, but that was when I was getting my emails forwarded back to me. So I'm like, okay, well, these people are stupid. They don't know. I know. And which obviously is slightly delusional, but also I had evidence. It was right there.
Sure.
And so then I put my stuff up on the internet because it's 2002, right? And this is like, this is back when
pre-WordPress. This is pre-WordPress. Yeah.
GeoCities.
Yeah. I had a GeoCities page. Yeah.
Yep. And it took off, man. Like, this is, back when no one was writing on the internet for free. Like, that was not a thing at all.
Yeah.
And
or how to monetize it. Did you figure out, there must have been experiments to figure out how to make money from it.
I never figured out how to make money.
You did. So it wasn't until you finally
until the books came out.
Until the books came out. Okay.
Yeah.
And then how did an agent find you and contact you?
The publisher. So MTV did a thing on internet dating. This is back when it was weird and creepy to meet people on the internet. Like, now it's like half of people meet on the, back then it was super weird.
Oh my God, it's so high. Yeah.
Right. And I had a date application page on my website. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, on our first date, it was like a multiple choice. And I was like, what are we gonna do on our first date? Shoot guns, go to a strip club, shoot guns at a strip club, like stuff like that. Right. Yeah. Like, and girls loved it. And like, it actually worked. And girls would like want to go out on dates with me and stuff. And so MTV came and filmed a special about me and like 2 or 3 other people, and it blew up, and my site's through the roof and all this stuff. And so then the publishers came back to me.
Got it.
And but it took, it was not until 2006 my book actually came out.
Wow.
Yeah,
so that was a bit of time then. So were you making ends meet doing different things during that time?
Mainly glomming off of girls. I wish I could tell you some noble story, but like, the God's honest truth is mainly I would do whatever. You remember speed dating? I used to host speed dating events, right? Which totally fit my personality, because you show up at night, you drink a lot, you make fun of people, you whatever stuff like that. Like, you flirt with girls. Like, I was so good at that. Anything that didn't require me to be in an office or to fit like that normal social, all the, normal corporate stuff, I did. Like, bartending a little bit, I did, although that was a lot of hard work, which I wasn't a fan of. So
yeah, that is hard work. They work for that. Yeah. So naturally, this is a natural trajectory into running a multi-million dollar business, with dozens or hundreds of people working for you. Natural,
Dude, we just passed 50 million in sales. We're a big company. We have 65 full-time and like almost 300 freelancers. Right. Amazing. We're like a grown-up company, dude.
So you're going to have people who've gone through Scribe who are going to look at your measly 4.5 million sales. Right. They're going to be like, oh, that's cute, but that was substantial. I mean, your book sold a zillion.
No, they sold millions of copies. My book, the only person we've worked with at Scribe so far who's probably going to beat me in sales is David Goggins. Like, he hasn't yet. I know his exact sales numbers. And he'll be when his next book comes out, he'll pass me. Yeah.
Wow. Very cool. But it took you a while to get around to starting Scribe, which originally called Book in the Box. Mm-hmm. And I remember being at Mastermind Talks in 2015, I think it was.
Yeah, that's basically when it launched.
Yeah. I remember you talking about it then. And what convinced you to get into that line of work?
Man, so this is how bad of an entrepreneur I am. For years. So when you've written books, right?
Small little books that I publish on Amazon. Yes.
Right,
yeah.
Okay. But whatever. Yes. Okay. When you tell people that, you get 2 questions. What's your book about? How'd you do it? Because can you tell me how to write a book? Right. Those are always the 2 questions you get. And I got the same 2 questions. And like a dummy, I used to answer the second question, like, how do I do it, very sincerely. Like I would tell people actually how to become a writer and write a book. No one wants to hear that. I mean, like 1% of people want to hear it. Everyone else is basically asking, how do I get it done without having to do the work? And you know, I was dumb, so I didn't recognize that for a decade. And then finally, I was at this entrepreneur dinner, and this woman asked me the question, same question, like, how do I write a book? And she, you know, was a big time entrepreneur and had a family, total badass. And she's like, everyone's been asking me for this book, and I'm just not going to do it. So how do I get it out of my head? And I was like, are you asking me how to write a book without writing it? And she's like, yeah. And so I started making fun of her and like kind of, you know, teasing her. And she like rolls her eyes out of her head at me. And she's like, Tucker, this is an entrepreneur dinner. Are you an entrepreneur? I'm like, yeah, of course. And she's like, I don't think so. Because a real entrepreneur would help me solve my problem and not lecture me about hard work. And I was like, oh, because she was so right.
That cuts close to the heart. Of course,
I did, because she was right. You know, when someone calls you out and they're so right, you can't even get mad, right?
Yeah.
So like, I got obsessed with the idea. How do I get a book out of her head? And not ghostwriting, right? Like she worked in retail or some horrible field that I didn't ever want to learn anything about. And so it was like, had to be her ideas, her words, her voice, right? And so how do I do that? And then like, it took me 2 months because I'm slow, but I'm like, oh, this is a solved problem. Scribes. Like, you know, Socrates literally didn't write a word down. That was Plato. Jesus didn't write a word down. It was the apostles. Buddha never wrote a word down. That was Ananda and all the rest of the disciples. So go, or his followers. We go through the list, right? And so I was like, okay, I could totally do that. And like, I literally wrote down every step to publish a book, write and publish a book. And there's like a bunch, but you only need the author for like 30 or 40% of it. It's an important 30 or 40%, but it's not all of it by any stretch. So it's like, okay. And like, I just interviewed her. We kind of figured out the structure and the outline. And then I basically was like, okay, and asked her questions and got the book out of her. Now, obviously, you know, I had to get it transcribed, and you got to work with it to turn it from spoken English into written English, because they're not at all the same. But like, it ended up producing a great book. And then she was super happy with it. And like, she, you know, paid me. I didn't even care about the money, because this was, you know, more my ego at stake here. Right.
Yeah.
And then she's like, how much should I tell my friends you charge? And I'm like, for what? She's like, for this service. And I'm like, well, why would you tell them that? She's like, because my friends have been asking me how I did this, and I'm going to send them to you. I'm like, no, don't do that. I'm not doing this again. And she's like, what? And she's like, okay, well, I'm just going to tell them whatever. I have 15 grand. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, I'm not going to work with them, but tell them whatever you want. And so she started sending all these people to me.
It's just like the email forwards all over again, by the way. It's like history repeating itself.
But this is how dumb of an entrepreneur I was. It didn't even occur to me that this was a business, even though people have been asking me for it for a decade. And so I was working with a guy named Zach Oberon, who's now my co-founder, on a different project. And I'm like, hey, Zach's a really good writer and a smart dude. And I'm like, I told him what I did. And I'm like, do you want to like just take these projects from me and we'll just split the money? And he's like, sure. And so like, I ended up doing a different podcast and just talking about this randomly. And the host was all excited about it, and then getting a bunch of email from that. And so Zach comes up to me one day. He goes, dude, we've done $250,000 in sales. And I'm like, what? Wow. It's like, yeah, dude, I think this is a business.
Wow.
I'm like, yeah, totally. And that was, I can tell you the exact week that was, because my son was also born that week. That was the first week of August of 2014. So we're coming up on 7 years.
Wow. Yeah. And so what were some of the challenges of building it? You know, it sounds like demand wasn't a challenge. So you had, that was fine, but there's plenty of other challenges, such as hiring good people, putting systems in place.
This was so hard. I'll tell you why, because what we do is we help people write, publish, and market their books. We take them all the way through the process, right? And these are people like you, like intelligent, successful, accomplished, like entrepreneurs, you know, high-level executives, CEOs, celebrities, athletes, people who you know, like, this isn't like not the Walmart crowd. I mean, although it's funny, I went to Walmart today with my kids, but you know what I mean? And so like, these are demanding people, right? And so like, trying to scale, if I did 10 or 20 books a year and had like 1 or 2 people, 3 people working with me, this would be like, whatever, a $500,000, $1 million a year business or something like that. And like, it'd make a nice profit. And there's literally an infinite number of those businesses right now, right? Freelancers hanging out a shingle.
Yeah.
That's easy.
That's not what you wanted though.
No. Well, I mean,
you're go big or go home kind of guy.
Exactly. I wanted to do the definitive, like the brand in the space, the company, like because there wasn't one. There still isn't, except for us. Like there's plenty of great little companies, but no one did it big. And so, dude, scaling that was so hard, right? Like being able to write 10 books in a year, totally doable. 100 books in a year, that's a different monster. And we've got 1,000 authors in process right now, dude.
Wow.
And so like that, it was so difficult to scale a creative process that fits alongside a high touch customer service process. Man, this was like, I can't even take credit for it. When we got to 2.5 million, the wheels came off. The company totally broke. I had no idea how to scale it. And we got totally lucky. One of our clients was this man named Javon McCormick, who was at the time the president of Headspring Software and kind of looking for his next thing, loved our service, loved our product, and like kind of was coaching me on how to be a CEO. And finally, I'm like, will you just please come run this so I don't have to? and that literally, he took over when we'd done 2.5 million sales and we just crossed 50 million. It's him, man. He comes out of the sales ops background and he's just brilliant at it and so good. And here we are.
And what did you learn, particularly around hiring? We were chatting before, and I think it was before the interview, and you were saying, it's mostly Gen Z millennials that work for you, which that presents challenge in itself. But how did you find, people that can? I don't know if the way that it works, if they do both customer support and
writing. No. So they're totally different people.
Okay, so that's interesting in itself. So you decided to separate those out.
You have to. There's no other way because writers tend to be pretty terrible at organization and customer service, and customer service people aren't right. I mean, you don't just turn someone into a writer. Writers, great writers, because we have to. I mean, we're working with really good high level people. We can't just hire some schmo off Fiverr, right? These are people who need a decade of experience, who've done dozens of books, right? And so that's a very specific skill. It's like hiring, I don't know, like an eye surgeon or something, or like it's not, you can't just have a radiologist substitute for an eye surgeon. Like it's a thing, but customer service is a different skill. There are very, very few people who are really good at both, you know? So no, those are separate, man. The whole thing, man, I'll tell you, it's funny. I'll tell you what we do in hiring. It's actually pretty simple and we're pretty good at it. Is our whole process. First off, we very clearly defined our values, our culture, who we are. And then our whole process is our hiring process. First is skill fit. Can they do the job? Once that we know that they're a skill fit, we don't care about skill fit anymore. And then it's who are they as a person, right? Are they going to fit with our culture, thrive in our culture, do well with it or not, right? That's all it is, really. And it's getting to understand and know them, not nothing. All the other hiring stuff is silly and nonsense. Man, we've tested everything. Yeah. Every test, all that stuff.
And have you had to build out experts in all these different subject matters?
For what? What do you mean?
For the writers? I mean, are you hiring writers that, we have an aerospace book that's coming up and
no. So our writers we have about 125 or so that they're all freelance, or part-time. I think we have like 3 that are full-time, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 that are full-time. But like almost all of them are freelance, because I'll tell you why. The best writers, the best ghostwriters charge, anywhere from, on the very low end, 30 or 40 grand to do a book, up to well into the 6 figures, 100, 120, 150 grand plus and more. And so we work with them. And so to hire them full time, if they have to forego 2 or 3 books a year, like we have to pay them too much. So what we do is we pay them way less. Like, let's just say that the normal rate's 50 grand a book. We're paying them maybe 15 a book. So why would they work with us? The reason is because we have they're actually making as much or more money per hour on the 15 grand with us as they are on the 40 grand for themselves, right? So like, let's say they get at 40 grand a book, let's say they get 3 books a year, but it's a huge pain in the ass. They've got to talk to 20 people to sign one. They've got to deal stuff. They got to worry about payment. They got to worry about running a business, right?
Yep.
But with us, they don't have to worry about any of that. Like they basically get to pick their assignments, and then they come in at a certain point. They do a certain amount of work, and they're out at a certain point. They know they're going to get paid. That everything's bounded and simple for them. So we get some of the best ghostwriters in the world by essentially giving them a process where they can fill their dead space with really good, high quality, enjoying paid work.
It's like the Uber of writing. Like when they have some downtime, they can fill it.
Yep, exactly. And then they end up making anywhere from 50 to 75 bucks an hour, which is, like maybe
good money. It's good money for a writer.
Very, very good writer money for them. Maybe not like if you think about it. Oh, well, if I get $100,000 book, then it's not as good. Right. But then what did it cost for you to get that? And then all that other stuff. So most of our freelancers are making well into the 6 figures if you count what we pay them plus what they make on their own.
Now, what was it like for you when you brought this good CEO, Javon, I think you said his name was, and he took over? Where did you find yourself fitting after that point?
That's a great question, because for a while, it was a little bit difficult, right? And not because I didn't want him, or there wasn't like an ego challenge. It was just like, it's not an easy thing for the founder to step aside as CEO and still stay in the company.
It'd still be there. Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's much easier for them to go off.
Either leave or run it, right? But a big part of it was I intentionally stepped aside for him. I recognized he was better at the job than I was. And so like that was a big part. But there was still the part of me that like kind of felt like I had to have my hands in everything, and I had to, be in on the decisions and all that sort of stuff, right? It took me a good 3 years, I think, to let that go. And for him to kind of step back and be like, okay, just because this dude's the founder doesn't mean, like I've got to baby him, or I've got to play, go with what he wants or whatever. It took us a while to navigate that relationship. And dude, now I'm not even in the executive meeting. Like I don't have anything to do with Scribe except when they tell me they need me. Right. So like, hey, we need you to talk to this client because no one else can, or we need you to work on this book, or to go speak here, or whatever. And then of course I do, so I'm still doing plenty of Scribe stuff, but like they think of me as like a tool to use. Yeah. I don't have a day-to-day responsibility. And then now I'm over here like building other stuff that's sort of orthogonal related to Scribe, but not exactly Scribe. Yeah. And so I'm kind of where I usually am, off on my own, doing my own thing, except now I have a whole company to support me where I need it.
And did you ever feel like, geez, what am I going to do with myself? Did you feel like adrift or anything like that?
I have 3 kids, so I usually there's not a shortage of things to do. Yes. But
not to one up you. I have 4, so I know I know the feeling.
We're working on number 4.
There you go.
Yeah. But it was less shortage of things to do and more, there's definitely a difficulty. You know what it feels like? I haven't had this happen yet because my kids are all young, but all my friends who have older kids that are also entrepreneurs that have gone through this say it's very similar to when your kid leaves the house, right? Yeah. That like when they turn 18 or whatever, and they go off to college or they move out and they have, and part of you is so happy and proud of them that they're like at that stage of your life. But then another part of you like both misses their dependency, and also like you almost try and reinforce it in a way, right? Unintentionally, totally, but you do because you're so used to it. And so it was the same thing for me, man. It was like I had to go through a lot of stuff where I had to realize, okay, my identity is not Scribe. My identity is not, I don't have to know everything that's going on. And then letting go of that, understanding that, there's great people there. I trust them. They'll call me when they need me. It's not like I see the P&Ls and stuff. So it's not like I'm just like, oh, I don't know what's going on. Yeah. I'm just not really involved day to day. but yeah, dude, there's a deep emotional component to that. It's hard to let go of sometimes.
Yeah.
I definitely had to work through that, no doubt.
But, it's interesting because there's so much has happened in the book publishing space over the last 10, 15 years. It's evolved dramatically. So, some might say, boy, crazy to start a book publishing company in this, atmosphere that we're in. On the other hand, you're obviously doing well. There's a demand for it. People want to write books, but there's also new media, social media, you mentioned, podcasts, webinars, YouTube videos. How do you see all those other forms of media coming into play with your company now and moving forward into the future?
Great question. So we actually right now, we do, everyone knows this for writing and publishing books. We started in books, but something like a third of our business is marketing, right? So helping market those books, and not just like the launch, but like a good book, a good, well-positioned book, just like a good, well-positioned podcast, can market you for years, decades, maybe even in some cases.
Yeah,
right?
People make their career off of a book. Yeah,
off of one book sometimes, right? And so, so what we've started doing is really kind of building the entire marketing universe around a book, right? And so, like someone like you, smart, successful, wants to be like sort of known as a thought leader or raise their visibility in a space. We'll start with a book usually, and then build everything off of that. That's kind of what we've built, is the ability to do that, right? Is to kind of build your entire media presence off of that. And because I think we're going into a world where pretty much all of the serious high level professionals, and I mean professionals in the broadest sense, are going to have some form of media. It won't have to be a book by any stretch, right? But like, you're going to have a podcast or a book or some proof of work out there that people can examine and look at and say, oh, okay, like now I see who this person is, what they can do, why I would want to work with them, things like that.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, on the marketing piece, I remember having a conversation with you, God, it must have been 4 or 5 years ago or something. You weren't doing the marketing for people initially. No. It was just writing the book. Mm-hmm. And I remember remarking to you that the funny thing is you had a reputation as this book marketing whiz, and yet you weren't leveraging or capitalizing on that. So it sounds like maybe this was the third place where you finally, the market, threw demand at you, and you finally said, all right, pushed it away at first. So at what point did you move from just the done for you into full-fledged marketing?
So that is one place where I can say we knew we were going to get into that eventually. The problem was in the high-end, high-touch service space, if you go too fast, you break, right? Like, so it's the opposite of Facebook. In software, go fast, break things. Okay, maybe. You can't do that in the service business when you're dealing with well-known, successful people. Can't do it. You got to go piece by piece, because you got to nail every single piece. Because someone like you, if we tell you, all right, John, I can do 2 things and I will nail those 2 things, you'll be like, okay, cool, great. You're not going to get mad that I don't do 8 things, right? You're gonna be like, all right, awesome, you nail 2 things. If you can do that, I can be happy. But if I tell you I can do 8 things, and even if I do 6 of them well, if I do 1 mediocre, 1 bad, you're going to think I'm bad, right? Yep. And so that's why we've slowly rolled out each piece. We could absolutely go faster, but not successfully. No.
Yeah. Very wise. I want to wrap things up with the question I enjoy asking, which is, I'm a big fan of gratitude. And so if you look around, particularly at your peers and contemporaries, however you want to define that, so others, obviously this is entrepreneurial journey. You've come across a lot, and you've mentioned a few names in this interview, but who out there of your peers and contemporaries do you respect or do you admire the work that they're doing?
That's a tough question. It's a harder question than I thought, honestly. It seems like it'd be an easy question, but it's not. So I don't want to mention my friends, like Tim Ferriss, he's a good friend of mine. So like that's unfair.
So let's start with him. What do you respect and admire about his career?
I mean, there's a lot, man. Like, I mean, I know the front career and then the back career. I know how difficult it's been for him and how much he's struggled. And I know for a lot of people, it looks easy on the outside because he's made it to look. I mean, he's kind of tried. He's put that image out there, but it's been difficult, and he's worked very hard for it and relentlessly, single-mindedly worked very, very hard to make that happen. You know what? It's not that I can't find a lot of people that I respect and admire. It's that honestly, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about other people, right? And not in an arrogant way or in a narcissistic way. I just mean like, I feel like my job is to do my work and then help others, the ones that I can, with theirs, right? Mm-hmm. And so the more I spend time thinking about or looking at others, it's just a way to avoid my own. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, there are some who spend too much time focused on others, thinking about others, rather than just putting their head down and focusing on what they.
Yeah. I mean, I would tell you almost anyone who gets up every day and makes a real legitimate effort to do something that's meaningful to them and useful to others. I mean, I got respect for. I don't care if they're a janitor or if they're Elon Musk, you know? Like that's, I think that's the only thing we're here to do, man, is to love the people that we have our relationships with and do work that matters to them in the world, Yeah. And so,
yeah, that's great. That's great.
I know it's not a great answer, but that was just what came to my head.
Well, there's another question that I ask frequently, which is looking further back in your trajectory. If you look back to maybe your childhood, maybe law school, maybe college, and that is if you're receiving an award for lifetime achievement at an awards banquet and you're giving a speech, who would you thank? Not just family and friends, but I'm thinking about mentors, coaches, people, business partners, investors, people who along the way helped you at critical junctures, helped you with overcoming a challenge or growing a new business. Who would that be? The management team at your dad's restaurant, I imagine, those guys.
I might pull a Jordan and thank all the people who wronged me, and do one of those real bitter, I wouldn't be as bitter as he was about it, but I could see myself doing it. Maybe not now, but I would have 5
that does fuel
ago.
us, right?
It fuels us. It can.
Yeah.
What's funny? It's I wouldn't trade lives with Jordan though. He's an amazing basketball player, greatest ever, still bitter and angry about nonsense he made up in his head. And it's there's a price you pay for that, Yeah. I legit would not trade lives for him. I swear to God.
Yeah.
So who would I think? I honestly, man, I would have to start with my wife, and my CEO and my co-founder. I haven't had many, for better or worse. I have not had many mentors. If I were to name my mentors, they'd mainly be dead people who wrote books that I read, that I read. I'm not kidding. If I was picking mentors, no one real in my life has influenced me more than Cyrus the Great or Buddha or Socrates or, I could go, let me go, Malcolm X, accepting the people closest to me that I'm in relationships with that I love, those are the ones who've had the most influence on me, man. It's not mentor type, some people have mentors that works great for them. It's never, for whatever reason, it's never worked for me. Or I've just never had one.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people struggle with that anyways. Well, Tucker, this has been great. Scribe Media is the name of the company. Where can people go to learn more about you?
For scribemedia.com for the company or tuckermax.com for me.
Excellent. All right, Tucker, thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.